Ellen Parker, a 68-year-old widow living alone in her quiet Boston home, never expected her life to twist into danger. On a cold Tuesday morning, she returned early from a routine doctor's appointment and paused in the hallway when she heard her daughter, Carol, speaking sharply on the phone. "The guide will make it look like an accident," Carol whispered. "She'll slip on the ice, fall, freeze to death." Ellen froze, clutching her purse. Those words felt unreal. But as she listened, her heartbeat steadied instead of rising. She whispered to herself, "So, sweetheart, this is the game you want to play." Ellen stayed perfectly silent, standing behind the hallway wall where her daughter couldn't see her. Carol continued calmly, "The insurance money will solve everything. $2 million is enough to fix our problems." Ellen's heart cracked, not from fear but disbelief. Her only child was planning her death like it was a business meeting. She quietly stepped back outside, then reopened the front door loudly so Carol would think she'd just arrived. "Mom, that you?" Carol called. Ellen forced a smile into her voice. "Yes, dear. Traffic was awful." Carol walked out with her usual sweet smile, hiding the darkness Ellen now understood too well. "Did the doctor say you're okay?" Carol asked gently as she handed Ellen a warm cup of tea. Ellen watched her daughter closely, wondering how long she had practiced this perfect act. "Healthy as a horse," Ellen replied cheerfully. Carol's smile twitched for half a second. That small reaction told Ellen everything. Her daughter needed her dead, not healthy. Ellen sipped the tea slowly. "The Alaska trip is in 5 days," Carol said. "Are you excited?" Ellen nodded. "Oh, very excited." Inside she whispered, "Excited because you have no idea what's coming." She had survived life storms before. She would survive this too. The next morning, Ellen woke with a determination she hadn't felt in years. She spent hours at the public library reading everything she could about Alaskan wilderness accidents, frozen lakes, rescue procedures, and insurance rules. The more she read, the clearer it became. Carol had chosen Alaska because the cold could hide any crime. By noon, Ellen sat across from James Porter, her late husband's old law partner. "Ellen, what you're describing is attempted murder," he said. "We need to call the police." She shook her head. "With what proof?" "She'll deny everything. I need a smarter plan, James. One she won't see coming." James leaned back, concerned. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. Ellen looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm going to Alaska," she said firmly. "But the guide Carol hired is going to get a surprise." She explained how she planned to meet the guide, offer him a better deal, and turn Carol's murder plot into a trap. $50,000 to help me disappear instead of die," she added. James shook his head, shocked. "Ellen, this is dangerous." She smiled. "So is letting my daughter kill me. At least this way I have a chance, and maybe justice." That evening, Ellen called the guide directly using the number from the travel documents. "Mr. Thomas, this is Ellen Parker," she said calmly. The man on the phone hesitated, his voice tight. "Yes, ma'am. Your daughter told me you're excited for the trip." Ellen replied, "I know about your gambling debts. I know what she asked you to do." Silence swallowed the line. Finally he whispered, "Ma'am, I didn't want." "Save it," Ellen cut in. "I'm offering you $50,000 to help me disappear instead of die." Thomas exhaled shakily. "You're serious?" "Completely," Ellen answered. "Let's meet tomorrow." They met in a quiet hotel restaurant near the airport, sitting like strangers discussing vacation plans. Thomas looked older than his photos, weathered, tired, and frightened. Ellen slid a cashier's check across the table. "This pays your debt. Help me survive, and I'll add $3,000 more later." Thomas stared at the check, his fingers trembling. "Your daughter, she said you wandered off easily. She wanted me to stage a fall." Ellen nodded. "I know. But you're working with me now." He looked up at her, conflicted. "And what happens after the staged accident?" Ellen smiled. "Then I start collecting evidence." Ellen flew to Alaska 2 days later using the ticket Carol proudly bought for her. From her hotel room in Fairbanks, she called Carol with a cheerful voice. "The flight was smooth, dear." Carol responded sweetly. "I'm glad, Mom. You deserve this." That night, Ellen met Thomas in the lobby. His public guide persona was confident now. "Ready to see the Northern Lights tomorrow?" he asked. "Ready for everything," Ellen replied. Alone later, she wrote a letter Carol would find after her death, explaining sadness over her husband and subtle hints Carol could twist into a fake narrative of mental decline. The next evening, Thomas drove Ellen to a frozen lake deep in the wilderness. The aurora painted the sky in green and purple waves, beautiful and haunting. "This is where your daughter wanted it to happen," Thomas murmured. Ellen nodded, tightening her gloves. "Then this is where it will seem to happen." They followed the plan. Ellen pretended to slip. Thomas shouted her name dramatically. Her coat and gloves were thrown into the icy water as evidence. Hidden behind large snow-covered boulders, Ellen changed into warmer clothes. Thomas radioed authorities, his voice shaking convincingly. By dawn, Ellen Parker was missing. Thomas finished his report, telling rescuers the fall was quick, the darkness made it impossible to save her, and the current carried her body beneath the ice. Meanwhile, Ellen hiked through the cold night using a GPS beacon he had left for her. She reached a small isolated cabin stocked with supplies, a satellite phone and internet access. There, she monitored every update about her own disappearance. Hours later, her investigator Sarah called. "Carol just got the news," she said. She didn't cry. She smiled. Ellen closed her eyes. The real battle had begun, and she was ready for it. Sarah kept her binoculars trained on Carol's house as she gave Ellen updates from Boston. "She called her husband right after the news," Sarah said. "They talked for a long time. No tears, no shock, just planning." Ellen sat at the small wooden table in the cabin, listening quietly. "Planning what?" she asked. "Insurance calls, real estate agents, financial steps," Sarah replied. It's like she'd rehearsed this moment. Ellen swallowed the ache in her throat. "And the children? They're devastated," Sarah said softly. "Your granddaughter cried on the porch for 10 minutes. Ellen looked out at the snow. "She'll pay." Over the next 2 days, Sarah documented everything. Carol called the insurance company within hours, asking about speeding up paperwork due to emotional stress. She contacted a realtor to list Ellen's house. She booked an expensive dinner for 4 at a luxury restaurant. She also told someone on the phone that Phase 1 is complete, Sarah reported. "Phase 1, Ellen repeated, her voice cold. She really believes she pulled it off. Sarah added. She also mentioned that Alaska is perfect for solving problems. Ellen exhaled slowly. "Keep recording. Everything she does now tells the world who she truly is." Meanwhile, Thomas followed Ellen's instructions perfectly. He told investigators Ellen had appeared confused before the fall. He even pretended to cry during one interview. She mentioned feeling hopeless, he told them, feeding Carol's future lies. Ellen listened to the audio Thomas sent, amazed by how convincingly he played his role. "Your daughter called me," Thomas told her during one satellite call. "She wants to pay me more to testify about your mental state." "Take the money," Ellen said. "It's another piece of evidence." Thomas sighed. "She really thought she'd get away with killing you." Ellen replied, "She still does." On the 4th day after her supposed death, Sarah recorded something that cut deeper than everything else. "Carol told the children," she said. "Your granddaughter ran outside crying. Your grandson shut himself in his room." Ellen's eyes watered, but her voice stayed strong. "And Carol?" Sarah hesitated. "She spent the evening making financial calls. And she laughed twice while talking on the phone." Ellen clenched her hands. "She's celebrating while her children grieve." Sarah added. "She also threw away boxes from your house today. Photo albums, jewelry, documents. I managed to rescue some." Ellen whispered. She's erasing me. The next day brought another blow. Carol met someone in a parking garage, Sarah said. A man I couldn't identify. They exchanged envelopes. Looked like money. Ellen stiffened. What did she say afterward? She called someone else, Sarah replied. She said, loose ends need to be handled, and Alaska must stay in Alaska. Ellen's heart dropped. Thomas, she said quickly. She's going to eliminate him. She called him immediately. You need to hide, she warned. She's trying to get rid of you. Thomas breathed hard. I knew she was ruthless. But this, Ellen said calmly. Help me finish this and you'll be safe. Ellen planned the next step carefully. Thomas, disappear for 2 days, she instructed. Then walk into the Boston police station and confess everything. Thomas hesitated. Won't she come after me when she realizes I turned on her? By then, Ellen said, I'll already be alive again. Thomas let out a shaky breath. You're the bravest woman I've ever met. Ellen shook her head. Not brave. Just tired of being someone's target. She then contacted James. It's time, she told him. Get Detective Rodriguez ready. When Thomas confesses, I'm coming home. James replied. Ellen, Boston isn't ready for this. Ellen prepared to return from the dead with precision. James arranged new travel documents under a temporary investigative identity. You'll travel as Margaret Hayes, he said. Insurance investigator, here to review a claim. Ellen packed lightly, leaving the cabin at dawn. As she boarded the flight, she whispered, This time I control the ending. When she landed in Boston, James met her with a tight hug. We have everything ready, he said. Thomas is meeting the detective now. Ellen nodded. And Carol? Still celebrating, James answered. She spent $9,000 shopping yesterday. Ellen closed her eyes. Perfect. Let her feel safe. Thomas's confession shook the investigation wide open. He played every recording. Carol discussing the murder, instructing him, paying him, threatening him. Detective Rodriguez listened in stunned silence. This is unbelievable, he said. But airtight. Then Thomas added, and she tried to have me killed yesterday. Rodriguez looked at James. Where is Ellen now? Ellen stepped forward, removing her hood. Right here, detective. Rodriguez stared, speechless. You're alive. Very, Ellen replied. And ready to help you arrest my daughter. The detective rubbed his face. This case will make history. Ellen answered, Good. Because she almost made me a memory. Rodriguez reviewed every detail with Ellen. We arrest her tomorrow, he said. 11 a.m. She leaves her yoga class at that time. Public place. Minimal risk. Ellen nodded firmly. I want to be there. Mrs. Parker, that's not standard procedure, he cautioned. Neither is surviving your daughter's murder attempt, she replied. I need to see her face. Sarah checked in with a final update that night. She's still acting carefree, she said. Making plans, shopping, talking about how life is finally turning around. Ellen felt her stomach tighten. Tomorrow, everything turns around again. But not for her. The next morning, Ellen sat inside a cafe across from the yoga studio, hidden behind large windows. Sarah sat beside her with a camera ready. At 11:03 a.m., Carol walked out of the studio, smiling at her phone. Rodriguez approached with 2 officers. Carol Parker, he said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Carol froze, dropping her yoga mat. What? My mother is dead. Rodriguez replied coldly. No, she isn't. Carol's face twisted in disbelief. That's impossible. As she was handcuffed, she looked around wildly, searching for the mother she thought she'd buried. But Ellen stayed still, watching silently. Carol's panic grew as the officers guided her toward the police car. This is a mistake, she insisted. My mother drowned. They told me her body was gone. Rodriguez didn't flinch. "Your guide has already confessed," he said. "We have your voice on recordings." Carol's face drained of color, but she still whispered, "No, this can't be happening." Inside the cafe, Ellen watched her daughter break apart. Sarah whispered, "Are you okay?" Ellen kept her eyes steady. "I'm watching the woman who tried to kill me face the truth." As the car door closed, Carol still searched for Ellen's ghost. The next week brought media chaos. The story exploded. Daughter accused in murder plot, mother found alive. Ellen avoided interviews, focusing instead on the legal process. The reunion with her grandchildren was emotional and painful. Sophie ran into her arms crying, "Grandma, you're alive." Ryan stood silently before he whispered, "Why would Mom do this?" Ellen hugged them both tightly. Because people make terrible choices when they let money rule their hearts. The children asked if their mother would go to prison. Ellen answered gently, "A judge will decide. But for now you're safe. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." At the preliminary hearing, Ellen took the witness stand. Carol sat across the room, hands cuffed, eyes red but still sharp. Ellen kept her voice calm as she recounted the phone call she overheard. The courtroom was tense. Carol shook her head, mouthing, "Liar." Ellen continued anyway, describing the plan, the trip, and the cabin where she hid after the staged fall. Then the recordings played. Carol discussing money, insurance, and Phase 1. The judge leaned forward. Carol's face crumbled. Marcus, sitting behind her, covered his face with his hands. The truth was no longer a secret. It was a storm. The court ordered Carol held without bail. As officers led her away, Carol turned to Ellen and finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," she cried. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." Ellen felt a painful twist in her chest, but she stayed silent. Later James asked her, "Why didn't you answer her?" Ellen stared at the courthouse steps. "Because she wasn't sorry for planning my death," she said softly. "She was sorry she got caught." That night, Ellen sat quietly in her hotel room, staring at old photos. She had lost her daughter long before Alaska. She just never saw it. The trial began 3 months later. Reporters filled the aisles. Carol looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, her once confident posture replaced by slumped shoulders. Ellen sat behind the prosecution team, hands folded tightly. Thomas Mackenzie testified for hours, describing every conversation Carol had with him. "She wanted it to look like an accident," he said. "She told me exactly how to do it." The jury took notes rapidly. Carol avoided Thomas's eyes. When the recordings played, several jurors shook their heads in disbelief. Carol's scheme, once secret and perfect in her mind, sounded monstrous when spoken aloud in a courtroom. Next came Marcus. Offered a plea deal. He revealed everything he knew, and everything he refused to admit before. "She talked about her mother's death like it was a solution," he said. "For months." He explained the extra insurance policies Carol had forged, totaling $8.5 million. The courtroom gasped. Ellen felt her stomach twist. She hadn't known Carol had gone that far. Carol covered her face, whispering, "Marcus, stop." But he continued, describing her growing obsession with money and pressure. She believed her mother had lived long enough. The prosecution rested after his testimony. Carol's defense looked defeated. Carol's attorney argued temporary insanity and emotional breakdown, claiming she was overwhelmed after her father's death. But psychiatric experts disagreed. "Her actions show planning, not confusion," one doctor explained. "Multiple insurance policies, careful timing, recruiting an accomplice. These are deliberate steps." Carol sat rigid, eyes fixed on the table. She didn't look at Ellen, not once. When the defense asked if she wanted to testify, Carol declined. The courtroom noticed. It was the silence of someone who knew her words would only worsen everything. Ellen watched her daughter and wondered when the girl she raised had disappeared, replaced by this stranger. Sophie's testimony was the hardest to hear. At 16, she stood trembling as she described her mother. She was loving, Sophie said, voice breaking. But after Grandpa died, something changed. She cried quietly. I don't believe she's evil. I just think she got lost. Ellen closed her eyes, heart aching for her granddaughter. Ryan testified briefly too. His voice quieter, more guarded. I just want us to be safe, he said. The judge asked if he feared his mother. Ryan hesitated, then nodded slowly. Carol looked shattered. For the first time, true pain showed on her face. After 6 intense hours of jury deliberation, the courtroom filled again. The 4 women stood. We find the defendant, Carol Parker, guilty on all charges. Carol sucked in a breath as if the words punched her. She turned slightly toward Ellen, finally meeting her eyes. There was no anger now, just emptiness. The judge denied bail and announced sentencing would take place the following month. As officers led Carol away, she whispered, Mom, I wish you hadn't come home early. Ellen felt tears she refused to show. She whispered under her breath, I wish you hadn't planned to kill me. Life after the verdict was painfully quiet. Ellen took custody of Sophie and Ryan, guiding them gently through grief, confusion, and betrayal. They asked many questions, but none hurt more than when Sophie asked, Do you think Mom loved us? Ellen hugged her tightly. Yes, she said softly. But love isn't always enough when someone's heart is sick. Together they began rebuilding their lives. New routines, therapy sessions, long talks. At night, Ellen sometimes sat alone, wondering when everything had begun to crumble. She had survived her daughter's plan, but now she faced something harder, learning to live after losing her. Weeks later, Ellen sat in James's office reviewing the final documents for Sophie and Ryan's guardianship. The children waited outside, talking softly with the counselor. James looked at Ellen with gentle concern. How are you holding up? He asked. Ellen gave a tired smile. I survived a murder plot, James. Now I'm surviving motherhood again at 68. He chuckled sadly. You're stronger than most. Ellen stared out the window at the busy Boston street. Strength isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's what you have when every other option is gone. James nodded. It's almost sentencing day. Are you ready? Ellen sighed. Ready or not? Sentencing day arrived with a cold wind sweeping across the courthouse steps. Reporters stood outside again, waiting for a final statement. Ellen walked past them quietly, ignoring the flashes. Inside, Carol sat beside her attorney, hands cuffed, face pale but composed. When she saw Ellen enter, her shoulders trembled, but she didn't speak. The judge reviewed the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, witness tampering, and the recordings that showed Carol's intent. Mrs. Parker, the judge said, do you wish to speak before sentencing? Carol rose slowly, her voice fragile. I lost myself. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry. The courtroom fell silent. Carol continued. I thought money would fix everything. I thought losing my mom meant losing my last safety. I didn't realize I became my own danger. She wiped her eyes, shaking. Mom, I don't know why you came home early that day. But part of me is glad you did. Because now I have to face what I became. Ellen felt a heavy ache but didn't move. The judge nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Parker. He turned his attention to the courtroom. The law must now speak. Everyone held their breath as he prepared the sentence. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, the judge said firmly, the court sentences you to 18 years in state prison. Carol closed her eyes as if accepting a slow-burning truth. On the charges of insurance fraud and witness tampering, 5 years each to run concurrently. The room stayed silent. Carol whispered, 18 years. Ellen watched her daughter be led away for the final time. There were no more angry looks, no lies, no fake smiles, just a defeated woman walking into the consequences she created. As the door closed behind Carol, Ellen whispered, Goodbye, sweetheart. She meant it with sorrow, not hate. That evening, Ellen brought Sophie and Ryan home to a warm dinner and quiet conversation. They sat at the table, the air heavy but strangely peaceful. "Is it over now?" Ryan asked softly. Ellen took his hand. "The hardest part is over," she said. "But healing takes time." Sophie looked down. "Will we ever see Mom again?" Ellen answered gently. "One day when you're older and if you want to. But for now we focus on us." The children nodded. After dinner they watched a movie together, the first normal moment they'd shared in months. Ellen realized normal would return piece by piece. Months passed, and the three of them began forming a new rhythm. Ellen enrolled the children in counseling, attended school meetings, and cooked breakfast every morning. Sometimes she cried alone at night, grieving both the daughter she lost and the peace she once had, but she always woke determined. One afternoon, Sophie entered the kitchen holding a photo album Sarah had rescued. "Grandma," she said softly, "can we look through these?" Ellen opened the album with trembling fingers. They turned pages together, remembering holidays, birthdays, forgotten smiles. For the first time, the memories didn't hurt. They reminded them they were still a family. As summer approached, Ellen suggested a short vacation. "Somewhere peaceful," she said. "Somewhere that belongs only to us." The children exchanged glances and smiled. "Alaska," Sophie said. "It's where everything changed." Ellen hesitated, but Ryan added, "It's where you fought for us." So they returned, this time freely, without danger shadowing them. Thomas met them at the airport, smiling warmly. "Glad to see you alive and well," he joked. Ellen laughed lightly. This time, no falling through ice. They spent a week exploring trails, watching wildlife, and standing beneath the northern lights. No fear, just healing. One cold night, they stood on a snowy hill while the aurora danced above them. Sophie leaned against Ellen. "Grandma, how did you know what to do?" Ellen smiled softly. "When someone wants to take your life, you learn what it means to value it." Ryan added, "You're the bravest person I know." Ellen squeezed his shoulder. "No, I'm just someone who refused to let darkness win." They watched the lights shimmer across the sky, painting the snow in brilliant colors. For the first time, Ellen felt truly safe, like this cold, wild place had become part of their story, not their nightmare. When they returned home, Ellen began writing a book about her experience, not for fame but for clarity. She wrote about the danger, the betrayal, the survival, and the strength she didn't know she had. She wrote about the grandchildren who kept her fighting. She did not write with hatred. She wrote with honesty. Sophie sometimes read over her shoulder and whispered, "People need this, Grandma." Ryan once asked, "Do you forgive Mom now?" Ellen paused before answering. "Forgiveness is not forgetting," she said. "But I hope she learns something where she is. Maybe someday she'll become someone worth forgiving." A year after the trial, Ellen stood in her backyard at sunset, the air cool and calm. Sophie and Ryan laughed inside the house, their voices bright. Ellen closed her eyes and breathed, finally feeling alive in a way she hadn't in years. Her daughter's betrayal had nearly taken everything, but it had also revealed her own strength. She whispered into the evening air, "I survived you, Carol. And I built something better." She walked back toward the warm glow of the house, knowing this was her true ending. Not the frozen lake in Alaska, but a healed home filled with love, safety, and new beginnings.